Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu alaikum to everyone around the whole of the globe. And this is the Advanced Comparative Constitutional Educate itself. As per my usual record, I was in my room again last night, taken as the 29th of the July. After finding a lot of difficult time there, I was basically observing the concept of the judicial issues in the Pakistan that which are the categorical issues in the Pakistan. Whole night I was observing the ultimate aggressive amounts of the females. And when I just observe with my deep educated eyes, literally, and I was shocked. I was outstanding area of the legal remuneration as well. Thereby, it is a contesting point in the public sector today as a matter of judicial grace that the district coordinate officers and the official capacities would have been observed by the Republicans that they are trying to beat the modes of the areas of the assessment, the concept of the revocation of the remaining areas of the land record entries while the civil code in the central limits of the provincial autonomies of the Pakistan is a question which is not being adjusted, which is not being redressed, which is not being observed by the business principal activities. So when I just deeply cross-study the Income Tax Ordinance 2001 ITO, while observation of the same into the practical fiscal narrative facts someday saying these issues, I come up with a lot of the factors by myself that the individuals in the Pakistan, especially males, and when I just observe the confined ratio of the females into their houses, what the both sector are trying to convince the both of them in the retroactive passed out religious or non-religious areas, the concept of the properties, the concept of the revocation of the laws, the concept of the derogatory remarks of to the females after reproduction from the female and after reproduction organ limited concession to the female by the male is a question which is not being redressed by either of the facts in the uh, proper reconciled area of living. When I just cross-study all of these elementary question of the public resilience by myself throughout a decade in the continual part of the existence via the constitutional article 199, I come up with the next thought that the constitutional mandate is there in the Pakistan, but the ordinary individuals are not in the positions to observe the confined area of their reflex senses. Thereby, when I just observe the a lot of the females produced by the Republicans, and while those females are being produced and were produced, but the parents of the same subjected matter by the Article 184 under the constitutional limits of the Pakistan. Often of the times, I'm talking about 75% men dominant society in the Pakistan. The rest of the 25%, I'm just not saying them to be in the offshore record. The 75% of the population of the men dominant in the societal indifferences of the Pakistan and the civil discrepant behavior of the same subjected neglection is a baseline question. Today, as a matter of judicial grace, I observed whole night during the 29th of the July and doing this activity over the 30th July as to reform the Republicans that as to understand the legal reforms areas of the principal debtors, principal creditors. When I just observe the whole of the additional session judges areas of the session judges areas of the Lahore High Court upper judicial officers, I am just observed that the concept of the not observing the facts under the myth of the civil discrepant behavior into the gross inventories of not having the dates culture. So this is a concept of understanding basically which I am just portraying today. When an individual is trying to convince you that he is or she is suffering from frivolous litigation, thereby the code of the civil procedure come into dictation to you, 1908, amended one and enforced one in the whole of the Lahore. But as a Pakistani and Indian, you are not in the positions to observe the issues of the same. Despite of all these issues, what you observe is the question which is being reflected under the post-traumatic disorder into the family dictations of this third or second person, often of the times under the tenant at will status. When I just observe the civil declined judgments applied one in the Pakistan, I'm just coming up with the next thought by myself that females are somehow groomed better than the men. But the men are not in the observation of the same female in the subjected lines of the civil observation of the same subjected lines in the practical sanctions under the COVID-19 vicinity. When I just try to confine myself in my own household judicial room, then I just come up with the next thought that the men dominant societies in the aggression of the confessions to the compression of females' complexity, reproductive, disordered ingredients while using the hotels and the restaurant. Thereby, when I just collaterally and collectively understood these points, I just easily concluded a point of the constitutional issue by myself over my shoulder last night. The concept of the rotation of the females from the one side to the another is a question which is not being addressed by the females. And the question of the rotation of the males into the public amenities roads is a myth which is not being addressed by the concept of the public disasters. So, when I just observe the females' deferred transitional reproduction issues, females' deferred transitional reproduction, and their parents trying to convince the conviction rate of the reproduction. Today, I just observed the conviction rate of the reproduction of the malgroomed females and males in the Pakistan. And when I just cross multiply the divisional areas, that what is the cost beneficiary of the reproduction of the same, then it becomes an objective lines in the same subject matter in the constitutional article, while the constitutional mandate that the females which are outvalued in the public sector, while such females are trying to settle down the cost effective methods of the earnings, offline earnings, online earnings, and the commodities which they comprehend by the ancestral expenses. This is the matter that the expenses under the ancestral expenses in the Pakistan often of the time are not considered as the incomes of the first person and second person. So the second person and the first person is just extending his income into the ancestral expenses, and the same children under the civil defection clauses are found in the Supreme Judicial Council as to contest the civil litigation for the reformative methods of earning off their own hand minors collective reproduction in the negations to the section 164 of the Code of Criminal Procedure while comprehending Section 164A rape under the Code of the Criminal Procedure in the hotels with having the depiction of the CPC as well. The Section 150, the transfer of the cases of such females into the subordinate panels of the Lahore Division appears to be mandatory as per my pointation of the constitutional obligation. When I just cross study all of these ingredients, the mandate of the public fact into the consideration of the legal observation appears to be the next point as well. The narrative judgments outvalued ex post facto and the confined females into their houses under the household appliances over workload always comprehend with the ishq type of, observation of the civil defection clauses with the proper poor unreconciled individuals, because they don't value the time, because the time is undervalued by the same both sectors. So when a female and a male is in the object line of the, loving factors and so-called scientific approved area of the just chatting to each other, I always come up with the next thought under the Kanune Shahadat order, that if a female is texting to a male for the bread and butter in order to show off her personal assets, which are obscene activities, then the personal asset of the obscene activities into the mobile phone and the watching of the same into its head appears to be the negative person. So, when all of these issues are reflexive in the public sector through the mobile ingredients as well, and the public is not in the positions to observe the rest of the remainder proportion of the Pakistani females into the declined areas of the 75% reproduction, and the males of the same are trying to convince the rest of the same in the object line as a matter of judicial grace. So it is a very odd area that when it is being redressed by the Pakistani, that the same Pakistani in the Pakistan are very happy after just having the compilatory mode of the sexual ascertainment from the females. And the females, after having the conjugal relationships, always come forward in the section 164 Code of the Criminal Procedure with having a nikah nama in their reciprocate area, and their so-called relatives in association always negate their statements in the cross verification of the judicial confession as well. So when the CDR in document is there, they such females are in the obscene activities as well with the same subject line as well. That is called the principal illicit connection with the series of the males which are into the headline clauses of the female into the legal tribunals administrative cost operational one. I have experienced these sort of the negative senses of the Republicans. That's why I'm just lamenting the common commodity of the Public Service Commission, Federal Public Service Commission statements by myself that to reform the Republicans into better lines of their existence in the surface of the Pakistan, because I'm the state of the Pakistan and I'm observing this question by myself. The secondary issue and the primary issue, both when just be multiplied together, it comes very operative, functional, and in the divisional method, that the young students are, despite of learning to their education, are found as to just rotating in the malified intentions, and their parents are trying to convince the rest of the same family, subordinate individuals in the prime coast official declined areas that such child in the defection of the civil clauses are not in the possession of uh, overseeing the official mandate of the same subject line in the republic sector as well. When I just observe all of these females lineal observation antecedent defection clauses, I come up with the operative action line that in the Supreme Judicial Council, via the Article 184 of the Supreme Judicial Council, it should have been considered a mandate obligation of the same subjected line, that if the females are being rotated in the same court after having the date from the same courts and not in the disposal of the same document in their cost effective modes of the assessment, why you are just having the document in your possession always is a question in the judicial code, that you have to expunge the legal documentation into the right direction. Despite of expunging the legal documentation, what I observe is to confine those documents by the advocates through their official and non-official capacities, and after just having the shelter of the same, the whole depiction of the facts in the existence of the today lines of the sky area is an object line, idioms invented by Gulraiz under the legal obligation. So the question which I just observed by myself after just revisionating myself under the legal values of the obligations from the decade of series of my life in the operative lines in the public sector, that when I just observe the labor class in the Pakistan, I always said that the 100% of the labor class is more than corrupt. When I just said that the labor class is corrupt, the children in the defection clauses are trying to convince the wisdom under the civil obligation of the same observations. And these were the questions which should have been charged under the commission of the election commission petitions, where the election commission officers applied for. Today you can observe in the media channels the concept of the overseas, because they say that the overseas are trying to repatriate the revenue in Pakistan. I'm not of that statement, and I'm not willing to observe that statement. If I'm portraying an illustration today in the ground reality, that if an overseas is very is very kind with its country. Likewise, Pakistan. I'm a Pakistani and I'm proud of that. That's why I'm living and extending my life in Pakistan. Why I'm not leaving Pakistan? This is a concept of understanding. So if a person and an individual who is not willing to extend its life, her life in Pakistan, and the same person is in the out country and enjoying the reciprocate relationships there and want to enjoy the predominant proportion of upper age limit in the Pakistan, this is not considered by me as an operative judicial official mandate by the chosen mandate Article 184 by itself, that the same overseer would comprehend that he was or she was in the Libya, Lebanon, Kuwait, Qatar, China for the origination of capital. No, that would not be accommodated. If he or she was there in order to originate the capital, then what the hell the Pakistan is, he was or she was being produced in the Pakistan. This is a concept which should have been module to the same subjected declined individual. That's the way I just consider the things to be achieved in the legal reformative confined observation of by obsolete matter as well. When I just observe the conditional barriers of the dating culture in the Pakistan, I'm just refutable to understand those questions, that the underestimation of the female's reproduction through reproduction of the same male females, and trying to beat the odds with the same, and to have the concept of the aggression of the negligence in possession after just comprehension of the post-traumatic sexual disorder, and abandon her into the political anarchy is another crime today. When I just observe the political females in the public sector, what I just observe legally and lawfully as a judicial official mandate, that those political females are there to sell the words under the phraseologies of the legal idioms which the same females have never communicated by anyone, by the books, and that's the way such females are trying to dictate the hologram of the legal individuals. So the concepts of the understanding of the ideology of the Islamic interest is on the other contraband area or contrary area. And when you just observe the whole of the females in the Pakistan, what you observe, they are prima facie conditional low up growth area because of the females, their parental neglection under the love and affection. The parental neglection under the love and affection clause is an absolute area of not observing the females conditional growth. And thereafter, when I just observe all these issues under the admissibility of the evidence of the Kanun Shahadat Order 1984, I just come up with the next thought in the consideration of the lawful metal area. That the beetles in the legal area these days, you consider that while you are wearing a black coat and a white tie, you become a lordship. That's it, not a concept of the understanding. You don't know the value of the devalued instruments, even though the concept of the female's reproduction is ordered, and the males under the monopolies of the concept of the derailed economy, and while the observing the battle lines in the regression of the ultimate depressed channels and the constitutional barrels, and while the executable bonds These were the issues which have been considered by the judicial insight by itself as to understand the concept of the female's malified observation. I'm totally in the position to observe the invincible reproduction. This is a new concept, invincible reproduction of the females, and after invincibility, the invincible and the conviction rate in the equital sort of the depiction of the science, the concept of the overcharge obligation of the same subject line is a question which is not being addressed by the both sectors in the Pakistan by their collars or their clothing area. The females are trying to have the emotional breakdown as well syndrome. The emotional breakdown syndrome in the Pakistani female is a very objective question, which is not being in the positions to be observed by the same as just observe these issues by myself under the subjected lines of the confessional or admissible constitutional statement under the federal statute by myself as to just represent a cause of action and the Supreme Judicial Council through this video link in the operative lines of the battles through adjustable equity matter reserved points of the both sector because I figured it out under the humanitarian observation by myself. Then it becomes operative clauses while the code of the criminal procedure and the CPC that the code of the civil procedure. And then if the person is having the computer in the judicial courts, why the computer is not having the tags, Lahore High Court tags? This is a question which I'm just raising in the Lahore High Court, that all the computers in the libraries in the universities should have been attached the attack because the publicans have become the Republicans especially have become thieves and criminals in misappropriation of the wrong disposal of the assets of the first person and the secondary person in the crime and the principal defection clauses as well. The malfunctioning of the organ is a secondary question which is not being addressed by the Pakistan in the oppressive area or the oppressed area of the obsessive uh, dissolutions of the Republicans anarchies in the concept of the myth. I'm totally refined with these equitable laws that what is the status of the landlord is a concept which is not being observed by the Pakistanis. The tenant and the landlord is a question which should have been addressed by the Pakistan. The police station is observing to be the landlordship order in the confessional statement, and that is the truth. But because a state cannot be governed without a police station, without a high court and a low court, and then when the concept of the whole of the females in the regression points of the medical practicing area is a question which is not being addressed by the same upper limited individuals. Therefore, the same females in the object lines of the reformative of the humanitarian operational area of the medical science into the universities from the LUMS or the other reciprocate areas of the highly skilled individuals are trying to just beat the odds in the humanitarian observation, but such humans are in the negation of the cost dictation of their own because of the low self-esteem associated with the organic dissolved transitional area as well. So I still observe the confessional statement of the observation of the Republicans and the Republicans, both sectors, that it is price hike. Okay, we humbly accept that it is a price hike here in the globe because I always said that there is a price of the valuing the property or the life in the upper ages limits, but the Pakistanis are not in the positions to confess the same in the object line of their official mandate because they are into habit of considering the others reciprocate areas of living with the same subject lines, and after that what they just confess the more and much in the household areas of execution of their shorty sexual illicit activities that they were not aware of the primary facts in association with the real location of the assets and the well statements into their personal areas of living. And after that they would be found in the begging culture in the public sector because of the non-disposal of the acquisition in the laminating area of the acceptance of the question of the methods of accounts and the deficit disorder of the recovery of the areas of the land revenue entries would have been considered a question of the century under the Lahore divisional benches under my judicial signature. Taken here has the advanced comparative constitutional advocate by itself that as to represent a cause of central action in the Lahore High Court. Through this video link, I'm just confessing the non-admissibility of the non-approved or disapproved non-transitional sorts of the land revenue record entries under the LROs. So when the LROs, land revenue officers, are in the official mandate of just expunging the documents in the wrong disposal, thereby the concept of the other persons in the location of the assets disposal would have been considered not in the admissible question of the fact under the banking statements as well. Thereby, the banking statements are outvalued because of the over valued of the reproduction growth rate of the females, and all of them collectively want to have the joint venture of succeeding into the point of aggression of the public tranquilities of incomes. Public tranquilities of income under the inheritance sort of the defection clauses would have been considered the secondary statement under the Supreme Judicial Council because of this advanced sort of the constitutional advocate by itself. So these judgments which I just read under the judicial facts without having the observation of the anyone is that I was in the positions to rescue myself under the seconds of the working workload statements throughout my 20s. That's the way I just observe the confessional statements of the central individuals that they are in the positions to have the redressal of the accusations despite of the allegation in the perfection. I said that the allegations in the perfection is a term which is not being accommodated by the either of the reciprocate official mandate because of the non accustomed or customized renderized sort of the elements into their household and the official mandate. So when the residential come, the principal business activated areas are in the offshore activities, and there might be the anonymity clauses as well in the principal succeeding succession statement as well. So after all of these issues, what I observe in the banking courts, in the other courts, that the banking courts are trying to convince the cases under the code of the civil procedure, which is not admissible. The bank cases are admissible under the banker's books evidence, and thereafter the banker's book evidence is out of the area. And when I just observe the Private Money Lending Act 2007 by myself, that is a judicial consignment of mine to be observed, those statutes by myself, that it dictates that there should not be provided any private money lending to any individual or a layman, but all of the ingredients, when I observe their positional area of executing the destination of the Nadra recoveries of the total settled or non-settled or unsettled or disputed or non-disputed undisputed one transitional transactions of the individuals while rotating no not accommodated proper panels of the execution of the same. The question which object in my judicial instinct at the spur of the moment during the day of the 30, and it is the evening now. It's getting evening here in the Lahore division. So I'm just getting reflex my organs in order to dictate these points to the subordinate judicial officers that not to render any sort of the allegations of the public accommodated facts, because those publicans are in the position to redress the aggression of the defection clauses in the public sector. Despite all of these ingredients, what they confine in their houses is a question which is the multiple polygamy and bigamy under the Muslim law is prohibited, but we the Muslims are proud of bigamy, polygamy because of the utmost reproduction. I always raise a question under the humanitarian question as well, that if a female is not having the reciprocate area of living, why the hell she is saying that the polygamy is admissible? Because of the belly, because of the poverty, she's saying that, yelling at. Now, this is not redress in my judicial court. I am not that easy sort of judicial officer which would have to render the issues of the females and males into the right direction. Because when I said that they were and they are have not in the positions to observe the rest of the remainder proportional into the family observation of the same, then the question of the civil defection clauses come forward in my code of justice that After rotation of the mal-groomed males in the public sector, which are injecting their bodies, they expect modesty under the signs of religious confession to the same under the scientific disorder mode of assessment as well. This is the Lordship of Lahore High Court. You thought that this lordship is not in the positions to observe the rest of the Pakistani without even having the utmost depiction of the clauses by itself into his house, because I just invested 30 years constructive day and night out. This was the practical nexus by myself. That's why I'm narrating the facts without even observing anyone's face value, devalued positions. While the person's incapacity, the individual's incapacity was fucking around their females, I were observing there what the hell they speak the lies out of the pussies. So today you can observe a male which is just speaking in the public sector is despite of speaking his word, most oftenly 75% of males are just speaking the words of the pussy inside his house, because the person is a pussy and the female is become a tech today these days. And this is a, I'm very out of my senses negatively. That's the way I'm just lament such sort of the negative comments, but alas we should settle away these questions, but stick to the topic then. After reproduction of the females in the depression, after reproduction of the females in the depression through the years 2018, when there was a COVID-19, constructively 2022, the males are saying that there is a price hike. What about the 4 years commutation under the family suits? I want a commutation of the 4 years by the men dominant societies, that they have to draw the depiction of the facts that where they were during the 4 years 2018 to 2022, when they were saying that there was a COVID-19 vicinity, and what were the prime persons and the reasons which the females led into the Lahore High Court and the Supreme High Courts and the Supreme Judicial Courts and the Islamabad Judicial Courts, why the females were in the those courts as to expunging the document despite of having the basic amenities to life of the same humanitarian observation, because I'm the operational lawyer in the humanitarian existence as well, because I figured it out as my consideration of the lawful remuneration by myself. That's the way I'm just considering all of these collateral minus degrees of the humans in the defection clauses as per the ingredients which are not being in existence by the females in defection as per their negligence. The facts of today is the matter of prior years. The fact of today is a matter of prior years which should have been addressed and redressed by these so-called relocated Republicans beating the odds outside the Pakistan, that they were not in the position. They are in the confession of these statements. They are trying to draw the depiction of the right, but they are narrow-minded. They are conservative when it comes to have their females. They become minor. They are very conservative under the narrow minded, but when it comes to have the female of the other, they become proud minded, and when the other is not in the positions to observe the both sectors, they become very proud minded. So the concept of not having anyone oppression, because I'm confused with having a lot of multiple issues of the females in Pakistan by the men dominant societies. They have casted a lot of females without having the proper reconciled area of living, measurable transitional one, non-transitional one, and they just want to have the repatriation of the original sort of the scientific sort of the assessment of the economy, and they all of them collaterally into the media channels that they were not in the positions to have the proper area of living, but they were in the position to casting a lot of females in the name of the tryouts of the sexuals. Tryout of the sexuals, and after trying out of the sexual, they have casted a lot of children and saying that these children being provided by the secondary and the primary ingredient, and you have to be confined with them in the subjected lines of the same. So, when the old relationships in the question, in the myth, and the concept of the derailed females is objective lines in the matters, I just observe whole night these questions by myself. As a matter of fact, in the reconciled area, I'm not willing to understand anyone now, because when I was in the observation of the fiscal narrative observation, that Pakistanis were in the points of their narrative defected females, their defected females under the negligence of the humanitarian observation are trying to settle down economical agreements with the rest of the remainder perfect males, but those males are not trying to have the same in the subject lines of the official mandate of the confined under the refreshment of their senses under the scientific approved transitional and non-transitional areas as well. This is the lordship. As I said, so I reap. The question is that the concept of the conceded and the both sectors of the defection clauses under the constitutional mandate and having the repatriation of the assets and the females depictions and the complexity of the mind into the compulsion of the modes of the reversal. When I just observed the conditional areas of the advocates in the Supreme Court and the Lahore High Court, I was shocked to observe their basic level of intellectual as to represent a cause of action in the, any subordinate official mandate. I was just shocked. The lawyers and subordinate advocates junior to me were not in the positions to observe the baseline issues of the humanitarian negligence, and they were just there